So obviously there's a lot going on in Chicago, and we meant to connect with William Kelly, a reporter out of Chicago, yesterday, but internet problems aside, glad we were able to reschedule to talk about important issues this morning. And William, of course, over the weekend, there was a tragic shooting Friday as school let out in downtown Chicago. A couple of young children were shot and killed. Obviously, there's a lot going on in Chicago, but tell us about some of the latest headlines and where Chicago finds itself among the rest of the country for violent shootings. Good morning.
Good morning. God bless you, Greg. Dual crisis, violent crime, and migrant crisis. They're competing, nose to nose, neck and neck. And yet Governor Pritzker sent the Illinois National Guard to the Middle East. It doesn't, it doesn't make any sense. Obviously, it would make sense to me to send the Illinois National Guard to Chicago immediately. They're apparently the Chicago and Illinois both lead the nation in mass shootings. We've had, again, back-to-back mass shootings in Chicagoland. But this murder, of these two CPS students, Chicago Public School students, leaving school at 12 noon on Friday, I think is especially significant. It shows that this is downtown Chicago. This is Wabash. This is what they call Jewelers Row. Some people might even call it the financial district. Okay. And we keep asking the question, when will people return to work? When will people return to the office? Why would anyone in their right mind even consider doing that when there's when students are being shot dead on the sidewalk in the middle of the day, Greg?
Well, and William, some other stories from over the weekend. Somebody was shot in the chest and crashed into a tree. They were found
Right.
dead. You had a concealed carry holder get into a
Yes.
shootout with carjackers in the city. So, when it comes to the police response to these things, how can the police properly respond?
There were 7 shootings in Chicago last night. Okay. Again, why the National Guard is in the Middle East is, I'll be honest with you, it's a little, that I'm a little stuck on that one, Greg. And when you think of these two CPS students, understand more money was spent on their education than was spent on my education. More, but yet somehow there's some disconnect when it comes to values, when it comes to when it comes to responsibility. If you look at their Instagram accounts, I don't know how much of these social media or videos of the actual shooting are still up. They're pretty gruesome, by the way. But and speaking of police response, the police, did a heroic, as always, effort to try to save the lives of these students as they bled out on the sidewalk. But when you look at their Instagram accounts, you have to ask yourself, they had a better house, better cars, better clothes, than I did when I was a kid, than most people probably in the world today. And yet they ended up shot dead on a sidewalk in downtown Chicago. This is significant, Greg, and I'll tell you why. Because there are more cameras in Chicago than there are in London, in police surveillance cameras. So the shooters, the people who committed this shooting, they clearly did not care that they were being filmed doing this. Okay, there was a time where maybe if there was some neighborhood beef or some whatever, they would wait for these students to go home, to go to and to go to the neighborhood, to go somewhere local. But their attitude was, hey, downtown Chicago is as good a place as any to shoot people, Greg.
So, William, obviously there's a lot to say about the ongoing violence in Chicago, but you also have the other issue of the migrant crisis. And last week, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson suggesting that the state can do more to move these migrants in other jurisdictions outside of Chicago. And the back and forth between the governor and the mayor included yesterday the governor talking about stepping up and providing more dollars to Chicago, and Chicago stepping up and saying that they're extending the 60-day limit for migrants to stay in shelters in Chicago. But clearly this is an ongoing crisis that you don't really have the mayor or the governor putting pressure on the White House to close the border. Instead, they're pushing for amnesty. So I guess what's the sentiment like in Chicago of those on the streets? What's pushing for the mayor's polling numbers indicating when it comes to this particular issue?
Well, it's a crisis of leadership at this point. When an elected official says that they're going to have, something is going to happen on this date, and then it doesn't happen on that date, and then it's pushed back to another month, or that they're going to spend this much money. And then it turns out that in Johnson's press conference yesterday, he said that he's spending $1.2 million or $1.5 million on the migrant issue every day. And as a reporter, as a lifelong Chicagoan, someone who loves Chicago, make no mistake about it, it breaks my heart to realize that we have a crisis of leadership now, a crisis of competence, a crisis of leaders that even seem to understand our founding documents, freedom of speech, for example. I wasn't allowed to attend the press conference yesterday in City Hall because the previous mayor revoked my media credential because I was asking too many questions. You can't make this stuff up, Greg. But we're going to keep trying to get the answers. An obvious question that I would ask is, where's the accountability? What is this money being spent on? Who are these vendors? How are you choosing who to spend this money on? If you remember, Greg, we broke the story and I believe killed the plan to build to house migrants in tents in the middle of winter on a toxic waste dump. And we were able to do that just standing out in front of the toxic waste dump. Imagine if we were actually, if I was actually allowed to attend press conferences and ask the mayor actual questions, Greg.
William Kelly, reporter out of Chicago. Greatly appreciate your time as always, and we will definitely be checking back in next week to get a continued update of what's going on the streets of Chicago. Be safe out there, all right?
God bless. Thank you.
So there you have it. Conversation with William Kelly. Glad we were able to connect despite having internet issues yesterday. So thumbs up. We'll check back in with him on Monday of next week to get the latest of what's going on. Appreciate him taking time with us as always.